Okay, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this next level webinar titled How to Optimize Your Network with VMware NSX. This webinar will be presented by one of New Horizons' leading technical instructors, Shawn Bolan. My name is Brian Duncan, and I will be the MC for the event. So all that really means is if you do have any questions or any comments, please put those in the questions or chat box, and I will relay those to Shawn or answer them if I can, if they're not so much technical related, and we'll be able to help get you the answer from there. Do want to let everybody know that this webinar is recorded, and we will be sending out an email this afternoon with a link to our YouTube channel where you can find and access the recording. As always, these webinars are presented by New Horizons Computer Learning Centers. Who is New Horizons Computer Learning Center? Shawn, if you hit the next slide for me. We are a proven worldwide training provider with flexible learning solutions covering a broad spectrum of topics taught by industry-leading instructors. You can see here a few bullets about our large international network, but mostly about our flexible integrated learning methods. Once again, a little bit about New Horizons, but what you're really here for is to hear Shawn talk more about VMware and NSX. So let's go ahead and let Shawn take over.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brian. As Brian mentioned, my name is Shawn Bolan. I am with New Horizons out of Omaha, Nebraska, and if you didn't know this already, New Horizons is a franchise-based organization. We have a corporate umbrella, newhorizons.com, and then all of the various centers and branches around the country, around the world are franchise organizations. I'm located smack dab in the middle of the country. You see my picture there. It's required that we wear a red shirt when we have pictures taken here in Nebraska, or they eject you from the state. So anyway, a little bit about me. Says I've been a technical trainer there for 16 plus years. It's actually a little bit longer than that. However, as that number got bigger, I started to sound old, and I didn't want to be old, so I'm just going to say 16 plus years forever. I've been doing this since the late 90s. I divide my technical life up into a couple of different areas. One of them is obviously VMware. I'm a VMware certified instructor, level 2 instructor. Got VMware certifications in all of the major pillars of technology from VMware, vSphere, mobility, desktop, Horizon View, cloud technologies, and of course NSX, which is what we're going to be talking about today. I've also been a Microsoft certified trainer for like 17 years or some ridiculous number like that. I'm a systems guy on the Microsoft side, Windows Server, Windows Client, all the virtualization stack, Azure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So a little bit about the webinar that we're presenting for you today. Obviously, we're talking about VMware's NSX technology. And you may be here just to learn, hey, what the heck is NSX? I've been hearing about it for the last 18 months or so, and I want to know what it is. So we'll educate you on that. We're going to drill into some technical specifics here, not only what the product is, but why it might be a game-changer product for some of you out there. So hope to give you a number of details. Of course, if you have questions, you can put those in the questions panel out there. We do have some time set aside towards the end of the webinar for some Q&A, and we can do some follow-ups as necessary. So what are we going to talk about today? NSX, obviously. I'm going to give you a very quick overview of VMware's technology stack, and that's important because NSX is going to be fitting into that existing stack. It's not really a separate pillar, although sometimes we call it that. It's going to be integrating with that. And then we'll dive into NSX. And I've picked probably the three biggest topics under the NSX umbrella: the logical switching, the logical routing, and distributed firewall. There's some other components, and I'll mention those as well. But that's what we're going to drill into. So let's do that. All right, so we all know VMware. Best-of-breed virtualization solutions. They have been the 800-pound gorilla of virtualization out there, and virtualization has changed the way we do computing in the last 10 to 15 years. I know it's changed my life radically, and I'm sure it's changed all of your businesses. VMware has grown from a company that just did a hypervisor, ESXi, or those of you who've been around for a while, we used to call it ESX. We've grown from that into a huge company that has all kinds of different technologies out there. So just a very quick look at those. Starting off with vSphere technology, the one that started it all. Okay? The ability to create virtual machines, running multiple machines on top of a host, sharing CPU, memory, disk, network, giving us fault tolerance, giving us high availability, rapid deployment, etc. I mean, vSphere started it all. Right? And if you're running any VMware technology, it's running on top of vSphere to create those virtual machines. Again, I know I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Okay? That's our pillar technology. VMware's Horizon platform. This is their virtual desktop, or as they like to call it now, their mobility platform. And in fact, I'm teaching a Horizon 7 class this week. I'm on lunch break for that class right now. Well, Horizon and Horizon View gives us the ability to do virtual desktops or VDI, but it also gives us the ability to present applications and do application streaming. And kind of the mantra of that is, you know what, I can get a user any application on any device at any location. What do you need? We can get it to you. The Horizon suite or family of products allows us to do that, and kind of focusing on the desktop and application side. The most recent addition in that mobility platform was a couple years ago when VMware scooped up the company AirWatch, which is a mobile device management platform out there, and integrating that in. Of course, we don't stop there. VMware is all about cloud computing. Whether it's you building a private cloud for your own internal uses, or maybe you are a service provider and you're standing up a public cloud and utilizing VMware's technology to architect and run that cloud. Whether it's the vCloud Air system, which is VMware's private cloud, or vCloud Hybrid Cloud Manager, vCloud Air, etc. VMware's all about cloud computing. And we can't forget about storage. If you follow VMware technology in the last couple of years, you've been hearing about a storage virtualization technology called Virtual SAN, or vSAN as we like to call it. And last year, VMware made a splash with vVols, virtual volumes, again, changing the way we use storage. So again, we're beyond just simply creating virtual machines. Well, with all of that cool technology stack and all the amazing things that we can do, the last element of networking, or the last element out there that really wasn't addressed in a deep way, was networking. Now, when I talk to a lot of vSphere administrators, and I spend my life hanging out with people just like you guys, okay, vSphere administrators, and I start talking about virtual networking, one of the things that comes up is, well, wait a minute, aren't we already virtualizing our networks? Don't our hosts have virtual switches on them? Our VMs have virtual NICs? Okay, isn't that virtualizing a network? Well, kind of. But when you think about networking, and you're all IT professionals here, networking is more than a network card, a NIC, and it's more than a switch. So is that really virtualizing networking? Okay, well, kinda. But what NSX does is it gives us a set of technologies to where we can go in and virtualize the rest of the networking stack. Not just at layer 1, not just at layer 2, but at layer 3 and all of the way up the stack. We can virtualize all of that. And you'll find out in just a moment how that happens. That's what NSX is all about. Now, I'm putting there NSX as a game changer, and I hope to convince you that that is true and how it may benefit you in your network. All right, so here's our definition. Let's get into NSX. So what is NSX? Well, it's obviously a product from VMware. It is a licensed product from VMware. Okay, just like Horizon is a licensed product and vSphere is a licensed product. This is a licensed product. Okay, so VMware is in the business of selling you software. This is software. Okay. It is a network virtualization platform. Now, when you look kind of on the right-hand side of the document there, or the slide where I put logical switching, logical routing, logical firewall, load balancer, VPN, etc., that's what you can do with NSX. Now, I'm going to focus on the switching, the routing, and the firewall because those are kind of the big three that tend to get most people excited. Okay. And I want to make sure this is really, really clear as we start into this. Okay. If you're sitting out there thinking, wait a minute, is he telling me that I can do in software? Because remember, VMware is a software company. VMware doesn't sell hardware, they sell software. Is he telling me that I can make software versions of routers and run them in a virtualized environment or software versions of firewalls or load balancers, etc. And I want to be very clear. Yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. Okay? If you look at the diagram here, okay, this is an ESXi host right here. This is where we're running our virtual machines. Okay? Well, notice what else we're starting to put in there. And this is what NSX does. Okay? It gives me the ability to virtualize a firewall, a load balancer, a VPN device, logical layer 2, that's going to be switching, logical layer 3, that's going to be routing. Notice that is all virtualized. That is all software. That is in the hypervisor. This is 100% virtual. Okay? Now, if you look way up at the top of that diagram, it says any application without modification. When you look inside your VMs and you look at the applications that are running on there, as far as those VMs are concerned, and as far as those applications are concerned, they see an IP address, they're connected to the network. They've got no idea that all this magic is going on in the hypervisor that we're going to talk about. When you look down at the bottom, it says any networking hardware. Do our ESXi hosts need network cards in them? Of course they do. We're going to put gigabit NICs there. We're going to put 10 gig NICs there. Absolutely. But unlike other vendors' solutions, which are quality solutions, but this is very different, okay, no special hardware. If it works on an ESXi server, it works with NSX. Truly software-defined networking. So let's go a little deeper. I'm using some terminology here on this slide, and I'm kind of splitting hairs with you here a little bit. Virtual networks versus network virtualization. And I'm not just trying to be picky on terminology here. So if you look at the left-hand side of the diagram, this is essentially how we've been doing networking up until this point. We build an ESXi server, we put a virtual switch on it, we connect our VMs to it. We've got special networking needs in our environment, and so very often, down here at the physical layer on our switches, we would be setting up VLANs, which means I've got to set up VLAN trunk ports into my hosts. I've got to go into the VMs, and I've got to configure the VLANing on the VMs, either on the distributed switch or the virtual machine, etc. We've been doing that. Okay, we've been doing that for years. However, one of the problems, and there's a lot of issues that we'll talk about, but one of the problems there is that I'm bound by the physical configuration of that hardware. If me and the person setting up the VLANs, maybe it's my friend Sally, okay, if Sally and I are not communicating and are not on the right page, and I don't configure the VLANing inside the ESXi server the way Sally's configured it on the physical switches, we got no traffic moving at all. I'm sure you've all misconfigured a VLAN in your day. Okay? Well, with network virtualization over on the right-hand side of the screen, again, I'm going to go back to that previous slide. We're taking all of that and moving it into the hypervisor inside of the ESXi server. We are no longer dependent upon the VLAN configuration on the switches, etc. This is all going into the hypervisor. So it's fundamentally changing the game as far as networking is concerned. Again, some very detailed specifics coming up. You know, you might be thinking, well, why now? What's the big deal? Why has VMware been doing backflips about this technology now for about 18 months and saying this is a game changer? It's because our environments, our data centers, are becoming more and more and more virtualized. The deeper you are into virtualization, and as our environments get 70, 80, 90, or 100% virtualized, it just makes sense to take the networking and the control of the networking and put it where it belongs, which is in there with the VMs. We still need physical NICs, physical cabling, physical switches, and physical routing, but all they need to do is be able to get packets from here to there. I'm going to define the configuration where I need to define it as the virtualization administrator. I'm going to define it in software. Fundamental game change. All right, here's a couple pieces of magic for you. Let's take a look at this diagram. First of all, notice I have 3 separate hosts. Okay? One on the left, one in the middle, one on the right. And notice that each of those hosts, we've listed out a IP address. That's the IP address on the host, physical NIC. And notice, and I put them in red there, those are on 3 different subnets. 10.20.10, 10.20.20, 10.20.30. Notice down here at the very bottom, okay, these are all sitting behind different routers. Okay? So I got 3 hosts sitting behind 3 different routers. Okay, they're on different subnets, not a problem. Okay, great. Got my network set up that way. Packets are flowing back and forth. Well, one of the things that we see with a lot of applications, a lot of virtual machines and things like that, is we see that things need layer 2 adjacency. Hey, this application needs VMs to be sitting on the same subnet together. Okay, they need to be physically sitting on that same layer 2 network. Now you might be thinking, well, okay, I could set up a VLAN and I could stretch my VLAN across multiple physical locations, and yeah, we can do that, but that gets complicated. Instead of using a traditional VLAN tied to the physical switching hardware, we're going to, in NSX, use something called a VXLAN. Now, there's a lot of connotations behind that, but right now, if you want to think of VXLAN being the NSX version of a VLAN, that's what it is. Okay? Now, notice my 3 VMs there. I've got VM1, VM2, and VM3. Notice they're all on the same subnet. 10.16.10 on each one of those as their network address. So those 3 VMs are on the same subnet. They are on the same layer 2 network. As far as they're concerned, okay, they're all sitting right next to each other. But we know in reality they're not. In reality, those VMs are sitting on 3 different hosts at 3 different physical locations behind 3 different routers. They're physically sitting on different subnets. Okay, so how can 3 VMs on 3 different hosts and 3 different physical locations all be on the same layer 2 network? And no, I didn't put in a VLAN. I did not put in a physical VLAN, and I did not stretch that VLAN across multiple locations because I didn't have to. Because one of the things that NSX does for us, it allows us to create this idea of a VXLAN, a virtual LAN inside of NSX. Notice where we have this item that says logical switch. So what NSX is doing in this scenario, and there's more scenarios, okay, what NSX is doing in this scenario is it's presenting that logical switch across all of those hosts at those different physical locations so that we get layer 2 adjacency between those VMs, even though they're different physical locations. And here's the beauty. What did I have to do on my physical network, on my physical switches to make that happen? And the answer is not a darn thing. Absolutely not. Now, if I do have VLANs down there, fine, whatever. Okay? But in order to get that stretched logical switch between all of those, I'm using vSphere distributed switches in NSX. I've got layer 2 adjacency. No VLANs created. Now, if you're a networking person, you're like, whoa, whoa, that's kind of cool. You're right, it is. Game changer technology here. Okay. Now, I've kind of mentioned most of the things on this particular slide here in going through that explanation. Again, as our layer 2 networks have grown and we've stretched those VLANs and things like that, okay, that gets complicated. You know, spanning tree problems. We run out of VLANs in our environment. Okay, we've got, you know, MAC address table limits and things like that. It physically gets difficult to do. When I take all of that and move it into software, all of those physical problems literally disappear. Poof, they're gone. Okay? Notice that on the right-hand side there, that first bullet point, enabling layer 2 over layer 3 infrastructure. I'm tunneling a layer 2 network over layer 3, no physical VLANs. So we have the ability to fundamentally change switching. Now the fun's just starting. There's more. Okay? How about with routing? what can we do with routing? Okay, so now I've got two hosts, and let's just analyze our diagram here for a second. I've got two hosts. I've got a VM on each host. Okay. Those VMs are behind routers. However, my little acronym right here where it says DLR, that's Distributed Logical Router. We can create logical routers. That is a software-based router. And by the way, if you're asking, well, wait a minute, how about routing protocols? Okay, can this integrate in with my existing OSPF or my existing BGP network? Of course it can. It would be worthless if it couldn't. Okay, so what we have the ability to do is go in and create a routed infrastructure here. However, when the hosts need to get data packets between those two VMs, okay, these two VMs are on different logical networks. They are behind different routers. However, when that data traffic is going to go from virtual machine 1 to virtual machine 2, because my NSX infrastructure is stretched across both of those hosts, when VM1 is sending a data packet to VM2, it's going to go to that first router. The host is going to look at that and go, okay, that's going to VM2 over there. That's on host B. Yeah, that's on a different logical subnet. It's behind a different router, but oh, you know what? Host 2 is sitting right next to me. He's on my same physical network. And so that data packet is going to get sent over to host 2 across my physical switched infrastructure. That data packet is not going to touch a physical router. Those two hosts are on the same physical LAN together. The two VMs are on different logical networks. They're sitting behind different routers, but those are software routers. So I literally can create a routed infrastructure in software. However, the data packets as they move between host A and host B and between VM1 and VM2, they're staying at layer 2. Those data packets are never actually touching a physical layer 3 device. Now, there's plenty of awesome router manufacturers out there in the world, okay, and they've got some of the coolest hardware technology out there. But let's be very clear. Every time I take a data packet and I send it through another physical device, no matter how cool that device is, that slows down the transaction. If I can take a data packet and get it from one VM to another that are on different subnets, and I can keep that data packet at layer 2 at the physical switched layer and not have to physically pass that through layer 3, I can keep that traffic going what we call east-west instead of north-south, which is bounced with our physical router. I have achieved a huge increase in efficiency. So let me present that to you in a slightly different way. One of the things we run into all the time in a virtualized environment is hairpinning. So if we take a look at these two VMs up here, let me just mark the VMs for you. So if I'm looking at those two VMs, okay, they're on the same physical host. They're both sitting on the same ESXi server. By the way, this is a router out here. Okay? Now, if those two VMs are on different subnets, they're on different VLANs in a traditional way of saying this. Okay, so this one is on subnet A. Just write a little A there. This guy is over here on subnet B. Okay, if I'm going to send a data packet from A to B in a traditional network, those two machines are on different subnets. So that data packet is going to have to leave VM1. It's going to have to go up to a physical router. Just going to tear apart the packet, figure out where it's going to go. Oh, okay, you're going to VMB. Okay, he's over here. Okay, it's going to take that data packet, route it back to the same host, this time bringing it in on the different VLAN and handing it to virtual machine B. We sent a data packet through layer 2, through layer 3, even though the VM was sitting on the same exact physical ESXi server. Why do we have to have a data packet touch a physical wire when the two VMs are on the same host together? Makes no sense at all. Well, with our logical routing example, okay, if I take this VM and this logical router, okay, I can put that over here, okay, so VM2 is now on that same host. Well, with that distributed logical router, okay, we're passing it through the layer 3 device that it needs to go through, but it's in software. That packet doesn't need to leave the host. I can route it between those two subnets and keep it on the same host. Keep the traffic virtualized. No hairpinning. Again, that's a massive increase in efficiency. And again, we don't lose anything as far as routing capabilities, full support for OSPF, BGP, etc. So we're fundamentally changing switching. We have the ability to fundamentally change routing. The last one, and honestly, could end up being the most significant component of NSX for many environments, and that is virtualizing a firewall. Okay? So NSX is going to call this a distributed firewall. And the reason it's going to call it a distributed firewall is, A, it's set up via software, and I can centrally configure it. Now, let's look at a traditional network, because I got to start there. So on the left-hand side, if I am a typical business, and I'm sure many of you are in environments where you've got compliance regulations, excuse me, and laws coming at you from all different directions, whether it's Sarbanes-Oxley or HIPAA or Gramm-Leach-Bliley, excuse me, or all of the various federal STIG requirements. I mean, we've got requirements going every which direction. Okay. Well, we're seeing that we need to physically segment things off. We need to have traffic control. We need to put machines behind firewalls. Well, if I look at that from a physical perspective, that means I'm planting these physical firewalls all over my environment. That's getting in the way of virtualization, because if I have to physically segment off the traffic through a firewall between these various devices and these various enclaves, well, that kind of flies in the face of traditional virtualization, where I want to virtualize everything and put it on the same host. How can I physically segment that off when everything's sitting next to each other? Well, in a physical firewall universe, that becomes very difficult to do, and it becomes very difficult to manage as things get physically spread out. Well, if we take the same concept that we looked at with switching and routing and say, you know what, I can virtualize the firewall too. With a distributed firewall, what we are going to do is give ourselves the ability to apply any kind of firewall rule you want, okay? Traffic inspection, okay, etc. That firewall is going to be a virtual component living inside the host, living inside the hypervisor. We are going to be able to take that firewall, that virtual firewall, and literally in software, imagine those virtual networks we talked about, the ability to go in and take those virtual networks and start to carve them up. Here's virtual network 1, here's virtual network 2, here's virtual network 3, etc. And again, this firewall infrastructure, imagine that all running in software. So what kind of traffic flow do I need between these VMs over here and these VMs over here? I don't have to worry about placing physical firewall devices between those, because I can get exactly the same firewall capabilities applied through a virtual machine, 100% in software, 100% inside the hypervisor. Okay? We are not sacrificing any security or any capability for the firewall. We're just applying it at the software layer. Now, a term that you see thrown around with this all the time, and I'll just underline it here so you can see it, is this thing called microsegmentation. It's a fancy sounding term. We love fancy sounding terms. Okay? Well, when we look at microsegmentation, what we're talking about is being able to take this idea of a firewall and apply it all the way down to the individual virtual NIC level on individual virtual machines. Think about that. It's not just a firewall device, which we can do those. I can apply this at the virtual NIC layer on any virtual machine, which means I can start to create these enclaves and wall things off in any way that I want to. Now, the Windows admins in the audience are saying, well, wait a minute, I've got a firewall in Windows. I can set up the firewall in Windows to do that. Okay, I'm a Windows administrator, Microsoft certified trainer, been doing this for years. Can I define Windows-based firewall rules? Yes. Are they easy to do when I manage them with things like group policies and stuff like that? I wouldn't say easy, not impossible, but not the easiest thing. With this distributed firewall, this is going to be controlled by our virtualization administrators. I'm going to maintain control of this where I need control of this and be able to apply these firewall rules anywhere across my virtualized infrastructure as easily as I could apply it to one single machine. I can do firewalls between devices, I can do firewalls between virtual networks, I can do firewalls on borders of networks. It's all inside the hypervisor. It's all virtual. Okay. We can go out and we can start creating these rules, even though I've got dev, test, and production machines all sitting on the same host in the same cluster. You need to separate out that traffic? Not a problem. We want to allow certain traffic through between certain layers from web to app to DB. Yep, no problem. Okay. Absolutely. Complete total control over the inspection. Now, I've gone through 3 pillars of networking here. We talked switching, we talked routing, and we talked firewalls. Keep in mind, there's more to NSX than that. Okay, 2 other components that I didn't talk about, but I'll just mention here briefly. We do have the ability to do VPN devices or VPN connectivity. Okay, we essentially have a virtual VPN device, so I literally could have VMs, and I need to create a VPN tunnel into those VMs for people from the outside world, excuse me, etc. Okay, we have a virtual VPN device. The other virtualized component that NSX has is a virtualized load balancer. So I've got VMs that need to sit behind a load balancer, etc. I don't want to go out and put them behind a physical load balancer because that's complicated and it's expensive. Okay, no problem. Okay, we've got a virtual load balancer that we can do out there. The other thing, and I'm just flipping back to one of my original slides here, the other big selling point with NSX is that not only is this a VMware implementation, because it is, but there's actually a licensed component of NSX for non-VMware networks, so we can actually do this for other hypervisors if you would go so far as to use other hypervisors. And VMware is developing and publishing the rich set of APIs here. These are all REST-based APIs. So basically opening this up to their partner ecosystem and say, here's the platform, okay, start developing cool stuff for it. Okay. So a huge set of partner infrastructure out there with this. Remember, this is a fairly new technology. If you've been following VMware, this is basically the last 18 months, maybe 24 months that we've seen VMware making a whole lot of noise with this, that it's been a sellable product. A couple of other just little tidbits for you here. If you're wondering, hey, where did this technology come from? Did VMware invent this, etc.? Several years ago, okay, VMware purchased a company called Nicira Technologies. They were one of the leading edge network virtualization companies out there. VMware very intelligently saw the writing on the wall that this was the next step in the evolution of virtual networks and said, we need you. So they opened up the checkbook, wrote a great big giant check for a couple $2 billion and bought Nicira Technologies. That has become what NSX is today. Now, we can't cover every single detail about NSX, but we can give you some different directions to go. If we are whetting your appetite, and if you're looking at deploying NSX and what this can do in your environment, and you want some additional details, New Horizons is, of course, a training provider, and I'm a trainer, and I'd love to have you in my classes. There's 2 really good classes that I can recommend for you. NSX Install, Configure, Manage class. That is a 5-day class. anytime you see a class from VMware that is titled Install, Configure, Manage, that is your basic class to get in, get your hands on the technology. How do I set it up? How do I do the initial configuration? How do I do ongoing management? What are all the moving parts? How do I set it up, etc.? The ICM courses, as we like to call them, are that bread and butter. Absolute. That's where you're going to start. Okay. One other class that you might consider, and New Horizons will be dropping this one on our schedule. There's a new version of this class coming out here in the next 60 days or so. It's called NSX for Internetworking Experts Fast Track. Now, what that class is it's a slight variation on the Install, Configure, and Manage class. And what that class is designed for is a person who is not necessarily already a virtualization administrator. Let's say you're the Cisco admin in your environment, and you're highly virtualized, and your company said, hey, guess what? We're going to start using some NSX. And you're the networking person, so even though you're not the VM guy or gal, we need you to get up to speed on this. So that NSX for Internet Working Experts Fast Track teaches you the same basic components that Install, Configure, Manage does. However, it assumes that you don't have quite the background in vSphere. So that class actually includes a little bit more basic or fundamental training on vSphere virtualization. Because remember, NSX is software that runs in the hypervisor. It's vSphere layer stuff. The NSX Install, Configure, and Manage class does assume that the candidate coming into that is familiar with vSphere technology. So in other words, you're already a vSphere administrator, maybe you've earned your VCP certification, or you've been through vSphere Install, Configure, Manage. That's kind of the assumption of the prerequisite for the NSX Install, Configure, Manage. If you're the networking person without much vSphere background, the Fast Track class is for you, because we're going to load in a little bit more vSphere stuff. That's why it says 5 extended days. So instead of 5 8-hour days, we do 5 10-hour days. So it's a little bit longer day, but we give you a little bit more information there to get you up to speed on the virtualization. Okay. If you're looking at NSX, okay, those are the steps you want to take initially. And you take one or the other of those courses. You would not take both of those. There are some advanced courses. Once you get it up and running, there's some advanced performance and troubleshooting classes and things like that to look at. But this is the start. Okay. Remember that NSX technology is technology that is going to work in conjunction with your existing vSphere infrastructure. So this is plugging into your existing vSphere environment, ESXi servers, vCenter environments. If you're a Horizon View customer and you're thinking, hey, could NSX be used at the networking layer, and what I'm running on top of that is a virtual desktop environment? Absolutely. Okay. It's designed to integrate into those existing stacks of technology. It's not a replacement for anything other than doing the networking better. All right. See a couple of questions coming in here. Let me see if I can kind of look at those. And if you have some questions, you can fire those. Question coming in says, do you find organizations leveraging NSX are doing so because they're undertaking a DevOps philosophy or framework? It's a great question. And the answer is yes. One of the things I didn't mention, and I probably should have, especially in the area of the firewall, since all of this is happening in software, all of this can be automated. We literally can have all of these rules and templates set up so that when I have to add in a new host or I have to add in new VMs, I don't have to go in here and redefine all of this, whether it's the VXLAN configuration, the virtual routing, the distributed firewalls, etc. I can have all of that rule set in place so that as I go forth and deploy, I am not continually reworking and reinventing the wheel. I mean, that's what DevOps is all about, is that continuous, development environment. This feeds into that 1,000%. Okay, so that whole idea of automation is another huge part, okay, of this. Absolutely, it's a great question.
Okay, Shawn, it looks like that is the only question that has come through that has been unanswered. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to keep typing those in. If there are no other ones, I'd like to thank Shawn for taking his time out of his day. I know that I picked up a few things, and it seems like everybody got a little something out of it. I'd also like to thank all of you for taking your time to attend today. And remember, we will be sending out a copy or an email with an access to the recording, so you can go back and rewatch it if there's parts that you wanted to review. So thank you again, Shawn, and thank you everyone for attending.
My pleasure.